What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 784. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me all the way from Cornwall in, if I call it the UK, is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
You think so? You live there. In the UK, it's Sierkovitz. Sierko, welcome back, man. We haven't had you on the show in a little while.
Yeah, I've been a victim of the set release schedule that is remorseless and no mercy for anyone, including my guest appearances here. But it's great to be here again, as always.
Yeah, super happy to have you back on. Yeah, we're actually going to talk about that as one of our topics today, the sets that are currently out and how that's affected kind of content, and also just like what it's like to be a limited player these days, where something weird can happen, like what we have right now, where we just basically have two sets out at the same time on Arena, and it's just kind of like, which one do you want to play? And I don't mean a little flashback set here that's kind of off in the corner. I mean like two new sets that are the current things going, and you have to decide which one you want to play. That's not normal, and we're going to talk about that. And yes, it does make it very difficult to fit in the extra shows. I mean, we still want to do a sunset show for Foundations, but it's like, when is that supposed to happen? Are we going to do one for Pioneer Masters? We had to wrestle with, are we going to do a full set review for Pioneer Masters, which is like, is it going to become a real set? It did. But also it's a reprint set. So like, maybe that's not worth it. We ended up settling for doing a set primer on that one. And yeah, a lot of moving parts near the end of the year here for us limited players. We're going to be talking about that. And we're going to be talking about drafting the good cards. Before we do, I want to say thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. Thank you so much for your continued support of the show. We really appreciate it. We also want to say thank you to Ultimate Guard. They've supported the show now for a little over a year. Thank you so much for that, Ultimate Guard. Deck boxes, sleeves, boxes to hold deck boxes, backpacks, Squaros, which are like branded deck boxes of different IPs, whatever it is that you're looking for to help protect your cards in your collection, you're going to find it at Ultimate Guard. It's ultimateguard.com to check out their full line of products, and you can pick up what you need at your favorite online retailer or your local game store. Thank you, Ultimate Guard. Part of being a supporter, a Patreon supporter of the show, is you get access to the Patreon question of the week. Interestingly, we're going to end up doing two of those on this show because we're going to revisit an earlier one for our main topic. But this one is a fresh one. This one comes from Alfie, who says, "Hi, both." Hey, that's actually lines up really well, Sirky. It's there's no name. It's just both. It's you and I. I recently qualified for my first PT at RC Lille, and I'm excited to play some high stakes limited in Chicago. Congratulations, Alfie. That is an awesome achievement. I will also be there in the frigid, windy city in February, I think. However, there are only 2 weeks between pre-release and the Pro Tour, so we'll not have much time to get used to drafting the new set. Do you have any suggestions on the best way to maximize testing in such a short period of time? And if there's anything I can do before the set is fully released? Thank you for all the work you put in on the podcast. Ooh, that's a good question. Sirky, if I said, hey, congratulations as being a guest on the show, you just got a Pro Tour invite for Chicago. Here's your plane ticket. We'll see you there. And you looked it up and saw that there was a short gap, like a 2-week gap between set release and the tournament happening, where you're actually sitting down, opening packs and drafting against the best players in the world. What would be your approach?
So I have many approaches for the early format because, it's a part of content creation, being ready for the set release before the set is released and having some idea of what's going to go happen. What I do is normally, and this is just me, I analyze the sizing of creatures and try to speculate on that. Where I basically try to see what removal is lining up well, which cards at common and uncommon I think are going to be essential for the format. And, you won't be 100% guaranteed that you're going to hit it. But if you have a vision and your card evaluation is up to a certain standard, most of the time you're going to be okay with identifying key commons. When you identify key commons, you can think about, okay, are the key commons to toughness? If they are, then things like shock and stab are going to be more important because you need to deal with those things quite early. If you think that the things are going to get bigger, then hard removal is going to be essential. If you think that the set is full of bombs, you might think that hard removal is going to be premium as well, because you have to deal with the bombs, because if you don't deal with them instantly, you're losing the game. So these kind of like theory crafting approach things are going to be important. Now, after the full spoiler is released, there is a plethora of draft simulators. And I'm not telling you that you can learn how to draft the set from the draft simulator, because the draft bots, especially early in the format when they don't have any data to build themselves a strategy, are dumb. But I still jam like probably good 50 to 100 drafts on the draft simulator before I start playing the set. Partially because I don't have anyone to play with before the set is released. Some people do play in Draft Monster and draft live tables and try to figure out how those decks would work. I prefer to do it the sort of high throughput way, where I jam hundreds of those drafts, not to know what I will be doing in draft, but more to give myself a good idea of what is possible in the format. Because over 100 drafts, you get the feeling that, cards for a certain archetype are a bit more available. Those decks look more coherent when you look at them. And after those 100 repetitions, I sit down and I make my draft skeleton for each color combination. And you usually release it as a stream with other people that do the same kind of process. And we build those 10 decks with like, I don't know, 2 rares and maybe like 6 to 8 uncommons, and then they fill them up with commons. And we try to make them as cohesive as we want to, maybe looking for interesting build around in some color combinations, maybe trying to see if what the design team is advertising is actually possible to do. And this allows us to get a good feeling when we go on the day one of drafting. And I have to say that most of the time, you have the instant feeling like, oh, these two look like the best archetypes. And these usually tend to be the best archetypes in the early days. Because what this gives you as an information is shallow in the format when you just start what is probably the best thing to be doing. Now, because the Pro Tour is 2 weeks after the set release, what you'll be doing at the Pro Tour is not going to be that different from what's going to happen in the early days, because you are going to be playing in those early days. And at the same time, you will have to practice for constructed. So, how many drafts can you jam in the 2 weeks leading to a Pro Tour? Even if you do 2 a day in paper, that takes a lot of time. Then you only will do like 20 something, 30. Once you get that done, you're ready for the set release on Arena. And then you get the first week's data. And I would look carefully at the data in the early days to see what's going on. And then I would look at very carefully at the data for the, 5 days of the first week, but not the first 2 days, just the day 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Right.
And see what's going on in there. Because first day's draft data is going to be largely noise. There's going to be some actionable information in there, but probably lots of it is going to be based on predatory drafting on Arena against people who don't know what they're doing, and they just like wanted to draft a new set, which happens quite a lot in the first early weeks even.
Yeah.
So the later the data gets, the more valuable it is for you to analyze. And I would analyze it not from what is the most winning thing, because everyone will be doing that. You should know that, of course. But I would be looking at it, what I think is a deck that will position me well against what people want to be doing the most. Because you don't want to compete for the best deck. Sometimes it will happen that the open lane will present itself. And I assume that you've been doing some limited in your career before, because you don't get that good and constructed to top 8 and RCQ. To RC without playing some limited. That just doesn't happen. And because of that, you will identify that open lane if it's there. But I think that the important thing is to have like plan B, C, and D of things that maybe are going a bit under the radar, but from the data you can sort of have a glimpse of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm going to be doing it for PD Chicago, but for the Worlds, I usually do the sort of like thread about strategies that I think might be going slightly under the radar. In the current moment, I did one for when the Worlds were in Wilds of Eldraine. I was writing a lot about how blue is better than the data suggests. because you can see that in the data if you go a bit deeper. You don't
and
see
I
it on a
felt like you had an
superficial level.
influence on that tournament too.
I got a message from someone later that they didn't feel comfortable in the format, and then they read my thread, and then they forced blue and 3-0 the draft in the Worlds, and I felt that was my probably biggest achievement as a content creator, to be fair. Because if someone can use my advice and actually do well at the Worlds, I'm good. I'm quite happy.
You're not getting better than that. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, for that, you need to have a very measured approach to data. And I know that some teams are doing it. I know that Eduardo Shaigalik is looking at the data through that perspective when they are preparing in the Team Worldly Council. I know that definitely the Sanctum of All is looking at the data through that perspective. I know that Luis is also looking at the data with Channel Fireball. I don't know exactly how detailed their process is, but I'm assuming he knows
I know
a thing
exactly how
about
detailed their process is.
I know that they lay out the cards on the table, but I don't know how much data is behind laying the cards on the table. And I'm pretty sure that then Luis is fighting with Sampardi about the minutia of which card is in which order, including some personal insults.
That's part of the features. Yes.
Yeah. So that's how I imagine it in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, and of course, at the same time, practice. That's not going to escape. I would say probably it's good to. I mean, it would have been good to play a lot of Constructed before the set is released, but I assume the Constructed is also going to involve new cards, which makes it a bit complicated.
Yeah.
So the more you can do of theory crafting before the set is released, and deck testing in Constructed is possible without cards being printed because you sort of can proxy them.
Yeah.
The more you can then later draft with actual people as the set is available in paper.
Yeah, I think for me, what I would do if I had such a short time frame, and it's interesting because even though I won't be playing in the tournament, I'll be covering it, and I need to know what's going on. So I actually do have to go through a similar process to what a player does because I need to get my feet steady, right? I can't jump into the booth and go, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what these cards do. I don't know what's happening here. It's not realistic. And this is my first piece of advice, is to be realistic about what you can achieve in such a short time frame, given all the tasks that you need to do, as Sierkovitz pointed out, testing Constructed and such. And so that means you are not going to be able to get to that level that like Luis describes when you really know a format, right? He'll often talk about drafting a bunch of different archetypes early so that you have at least dipped your toe in that pool at some point, and it's not your first time drafting an archetype if you do end up in those two open colors. You will be able to do that for a number of archetypes, but it will not be for all of them before you sit down realistically. So what I like to do is look at the commons and start to pick out ones that really catch my eye. Premium removal, overstated creatures, really efficient creatures, 1-drops, stuff like that, where I go, hey, this color seems really deep. That matters to me. I don't try to rank the colors. That's something that happens later. I never think in those terms for limited anyway. When people say, what do you think the best color is? I'm like, I don't even know how to answer that. Like, it depends on what else is in the pack, right? It depends on what else it pairs up with. And so I don't really go down that road, but I do want to know, hey, green looks like it has like a pretty deep roster here. Like if I go to the fifth, if I rank the commons myself and go to the fifth one, this is still a pretty good card. Where some colors you can say like, oh, wow, these first two cards are really, really good removal spells, but the creatures suck, or it falls off quicker. They're all low toughness, stuff like that. So I'll try to get that just to get a landscape going on, maybe what colors might be the deepest. But of course, the real point is to figure out archetypes. Colors don't really matter. It's just how they come together to form different archetypes. And my mentality on this is I have, what Paul has started, he put a name to a thing that I say on the show a lot, which is we're calling it a prove it, right? So this is like somebody says, hey, no, this build around's really good. Like it's really, you have to work for it, but man, this card is amazing, right? And there's a lot of times in the set review where I'm going, I see something there. But I'm going to let somebody beat me with that card a few times, and then I'll jump on because I'm skeptical. I'm like, there's something that's holding me back from just thinking that this card's really great. And so how about this? You prove it. You show me that you can beat me. I'm saying this to the world, to my opponents on Arena, whatever. You beat me with this card a few times and I'm ready to go. I'll jump over there and start drafting it myself, but I want to see it because I'm not a believer from day one. And that's kind of how I would approach the archetypes. Is you've got two things to work from. You've got the cards in front of you that you can kind of pair together and look for common things that end up working well in those archetypes. Like, for example, if you're looking at red black and you see, okay, there's some cheap sacrifice outlets, you should be looking for particularly a common threat and effect. That really tends to bring those decks together. If there isn't one, then the deck might still be good, but that's a big hit to an archetype like that. If you look at blue white, look at cheap counters, look at flyers, look at things like that are hallmarks of how that archetype normally works. Now you'll of course get thrown curveballs all over the place where they try something different with an archetype and you'll have to adjust from there. But every time they come out with a 2-color set, it's not like every one of the 2 pairs is some novel thing. It's usually like 6, 7 of them are kind of what you would expect. And then 2 or 3 of them are like, oh, they did something a little different here. So you can use that heuristic, to your advantage. Also, I believe, especially early in the format, that there are some heuristics that do hold up. For example, while people are messing around trying to figure out the nuances of the, blue-black deck or the blue-green deck or whatever, the people that play red-white tend to just beat up on them for a while. And, you'll often see the format start off very fast and then kind of inch its way over a little bit towards something a little more normal. And my assumption is just that there's a group of people who are like, I am going to take, what we on the show called a CABS deck, right? Cards that affect the board state. So creatures, removal spells, combat tricks, and that's basically it. And they are going to run over, honestly, me, because I'm like, oh, here's a cool build around. Let's give it a shot. Oh, here's a color pair that might be interesting. I'm going to give it a shot. And, they're just like curving out 1, 2, 3 combat trick, removal spell, you're dead. And I'm sitting over here like, with Think Twice's in my hand or whatever and trying to figure out if those are good. It may still be early enough in the format and your competitors, even at a Pro Tour level, may still be inexperienced enough at that point that sticking at least, not religiously, but like sort of veering over towards, I'd rather just have a very straightforward deck that just does the thing that it's doing, might be really good. It might be the way to go. And then the other thing that I would do is I would lean on content. I would listen to the set reviews. A lot of times our friends from Loading Ready Run will do a pre-release. Okay, these are made more for entertainment than like, hard-hitting limited facts or whatever, but they play limited. Like you can see decks, you can see interactions, you can see cards, and they often have good players play as well. So you're like, okay, there's something I could take away from this. It's not going to solve the format for you, but there's takeaways for sure. Look at what Sierkovitz is doing, right? Like if he has, one of his shows before that goes, or if he puts out a guide like he did at that Worlds, like jump on that thing, right? Because that's going to be really useful. Maybe you get a head start by doing the stuff before the cards come out or before the set's released, because the decks will be spoiled or the cards will be spoiled or whatever. And then maybe you practice for a week and then maybe Sierkovitz comes out with his thing and you go, oh, okay, this confirms some things that I knew. It also highlights some things that maybe I didn't. There's a lot of content out there and there's no reason to not consume that as well. You got to eat lunch. You might as well throw your headset in and listen there. Yeah, man, that it is hard though. I do think that it's worth noting that like that is an extremely short window. It makes it really exciting. Like it's way more fun that way than when everybody knows everything walking in, but it is way harder. I guess one last thing I should say to Alfie is if you can find a team, it really helps to divide that labor up and to have competent people testing constructed decks for you and to have competent people doing multiple drafts. A lot of time the big testing teams will do some in-person paper drafts because that's kind of the best replication of what you're actually going to do at the tournament. But they will also have people whose kind of job it is to just draft online and to just pump out data basically to just get sample sizes wherever they can get them. And if you're just one person testing, that's really hard. So that is a major advantage for a team. So if you can find some people in your area, Alfie, who who maybe you could just reach out, online and just say, hey, I've qualified. I'm willing to work. Does anybody need any? I'll do whatever, if it's your first PT, which I think Alfie said it was. Yeah, my first PT, that's where you're kind of in that mode of like, I want to work. So if you can get on a team, it doesn't have to be Team Channel Fireball, but if you can get a group of people together who are like-minded and willing to work for it, that'll help you out a lot as well as them. We'll see you there, Alfie. Congratulations. Should we do a Crack-A-Pack, Sierky?
Go on then.
Let's do foundations. I will say why after we do so. Our first card off is involuntary employment. Have you been playing a lot of involuntary employment decks, Sierko?
No, I have not. And
me neither.
For a reason of not seeing many of them. And if I see many of them, I don't get the sacrifice enabler. So I was partially not very lucky with getting onto the black-red train in Foundations. I think the card is good when you have the right deck for it. I just didn't end up in... I played maybe a couple of times like a copy of it, but it was not even... There was not even a dedicated sacrifice deck. I just had it like as a filler in my Gruul deck or something. Yeah,
it's also come down. It had a good run at the beginning where it was up in the like 57, 58% range or so. Now it's in the 55s.
I think that the early days, people that were drafting it knew exactly what they wanted to do. And then later it was driven by people seeing the data and not necessarily knowing what to do with them.
Agreed. Next is Sower of Chaos. That's the 4/3. Doesn't really see much.
Yeah, it's a fine card in Gruul, but I don't first pick those.
Yeah, it is a creature with 4 power. Next is Hungry Ghoul. Wow, we got involuntary employment and Hungry Ghoul here.
Pick the Ghoul, wield the employment.
There you go.
But no.
But no.
I mean, it's fine. It's just like not a first pickable, not a card that I would be hoping to first pick.
Yeah, I really try not to play it, and that's typically because I'm often pairing black with blue, and it's really not that good in that color pair. It's okay, but it kind of, you often don't put out that many threats, right? A lot of your threats are kind of one-offs, and they get answered, and then you draw more cards by the late game. And then you have a few more threats and they have answers. But Hungry Ghoul doesn't line up with that idea, right? Because it eats up your other stuff and you don't have that many other things to eat. And then it makes it a real lightning rod where if they bounce it or kill it and you've already eaten a couple of other creatures, it's not so great. Healer's Hawk?
I'm interested.
Okay.
I mean, as commons go, I like it. It's a really solid common.
Yeah. I have been almost exclusively just not playing white anymore. I have played so much white in this format and I am just bored to tears with it. Like I just can't cast another Healer's Hawk and another stupid 2/2 that makes a 1/1. Like I'm so bored with it that I'll just do anything to not. But that's like pure personal preference. I think Healer's Hawk's a really solid card, like you said.
I think I was more on the black train. I played a lot of black. I did play some white. My last deck was actually a Boros Aggro trophy deck, which was
you trophied
busted.
with it too. Very nice. What was the highlight?
The highlight. Well, there was Arabo and 3 Felidar Saviors. That is a good curve out. And 2 Soundless Healers, a couple of Burst Lightnings.
What? Wow, I lost to a deck like that recently. I don't think it was you, but I got absolutely trounced.
I forgot
by
about one small thing, and the Leyline Axe.
Oh God, jeez. You mean the card that we gave like a D or whatever on the set review?
I didn't.
Me and Paul did.
I played that card on the pre-release. I won a game in which the only 2 creatures I played was Llanowar Elves and the Hawk. And that was it. That was it. I played the Glorious Anthem thingy.
Uh-huh.
And then I was just swinging with the 3/3 double striking, life linking Hawk, and that just went all the way because my opponent did not have a removal for it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, pretty good card it turns out. Thrill of Possibility.
Nope.
I am not thrilled by it. Same thing with Elementalist Adept.
I will play that card, but I will not first pick it, that's for sure. It's a good, combat trick card, sort of. You play it into the 4/2 that attacks you and you block and you're happy with that. But
yeah, it's a bad Doomblade for low toughness creatures. Next is a Beastkin Ranger. This is our last common, by the way. That's a 3/3 for 2 and a green, and it gets pumped when another creature ETBs.
I will start picking them when I have a couple of Llanowar Elves.
Yeah.
And then they're really good.
And then they're really good.
I'm not going to start with it.
Yeah, turn 2 Beastkin Ranger is like a problem. Like it hits very, very hard.
And it's an elf for the 2-drop. It's also, it's like there's plenty of things that are happening. Yeah.
Perforating Artist is our first uncommon. That's the 1 black-red 3/2 with Death Touch and Raid. They have to ditch a card or sacrifice an on-land permanent or lose 3 life.
I am interested.
Good card.
It's a good card.
Is.
I think like it's probably on par with the Healer's Hawk in terms of power level. And these are the 2 best cards right now. So we'll talk about from the perspective of the whole pack, but it's definitely one of those cards that I want to be picking here with the Hawk for now.
Definitely. It's also interesting in that it's a weird design, like, 2 toughness, 3 power, but with Death Touch. It's like, okay, but it works. Like, and Death Touch really does, push it over the edge of being like a good blocker that, trades up for anything. It doesn't attack that often itself because of the 2 toughness, but like you can just send in, it feels easy to have creatures to send in, and that trigger does add up over time. Next is Fire Spitter Whelp. That's the 2 and a red 2/2 flyer that pings.
I mean, it is the best dragon in this pack, but
but it's still
I'm not a very big
this
fan.
card stinks.
It's like can be played in some kind of spells deck, and it's fine. It's like a sea level creature,
right?
But
it's a sea level creature
perforating
in its
artist.
home. It's a sea level. I mean, that is a very low ceiling. The reason that the reason that he said that it's the best dragon in the pack is because we've also got Shivan Dragon.
Yeah, as I said, it's worse than the so
effectively
there
unplayable. You go. Yeah. We also gave that way too high of a grade. I think I went like M10, level grading, right? Where like big dumb threats either were answered or weren't. And like, that was fine. It was often that, a card like this would be the last thing on the battlefield and they were out of removal and it would kind of take over. But that has not been the case. This set feels, at least from a removal perspective, a little bit more modern. It is the case.
It's just that they are always answered.
Always.
Because they are either answered or not, but they are just answered. That's it.
Yes.
There is one card that you completely skipped, the foil uncommon, I guess.
No, I don't read the foils. Yeah, they always put one in here, so I don't trust it. I just skip them. We can throw it in if you want. Are you interested in it? This is exactly
the same card. Like, it can be big, but I've seen it like being 17/17 and just getting chump blocked with the 1/1 fairies from the Mischievous Mystic every single turn and doing nothing, basically.
Yeah, he's talking about Clinquant Sky Mage, by the way, the 3 and a blue 1/1 flyer, and whenever you draw a card, it picks up a +1/+1 counter. It's an interesting card, but the problem with it is that, if you play it on turn 4, it almost always dies to like a 1-mana removal spell of some sort. And then if it ever becomes a problem, like if they don't kill it right away, it just dies to all the other stuff. So it's like, it just dies. It like you said, it's like
it's basically like a Shivan Dragon that also dies to stab.
That also dies to stab. So can I interest you in that? Last uncommon is Mild-Mannered Librarian. That's the green 1/1, and you can pay 3 and a green to give it 2 counters and draw a card at sorcery. Or only once, I should say.
Sarul's Packmate at home. It is a very solid card. I still wouldn't want to go into the green for this. It's not a high enough thing. For me to go into green, I'm like, pick 4 Felling Blow. That's the kind of thing that gets me into the green. Or like pick 6 Llanowar Elves.
Llanowar Elves, that's coming
Mild-Mannered Librarian would be a great reward when I identify a green lane open, but it wouldn't be a reason for me to get into green.
Okay, so right now you're looking at Perforating Artist or Healer's Hawk.
Yeah.
Can I change your mind with Herald of Eternal Dawn, the 7-mana 4 white 6/6 flash flyer that says you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game?
The Platinum Angel with some extras. So, I don't know. Honestly, I think that this pack is literally... I think that Healer's Hawk, Herald of the Eternal Dawn, and Perforating Artist are relatively even cards. It's your decision what you're going to pick. What I would pick from this pack would be Perforating Artist. If I would be like drafting on a Pro Tour, I would pick Perforating Artist with the hope that Involuntary Employment wheels. Because if I pick either Healer's Hawk and Herald of the Eternal Dawn, there's nothing else white in this pack. Nothing comes back to me. Involuntary Employment looks like a very likely card to wheel, and it's a good card in red-black. And I can have like this sort of like additional kicker for me to draft it. If I was drafting on Arena today, I probably would pick the Herald because I never played with it. So I would gain that experience by first picking it, and then probably would not end up in my deck. But if I was drafting seriously, I would pick the Perforating Artist again with this concept of if you have even cards in the pack, pick the one that has the most likely good card to wheel for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I like that. I mean, because you could wheel Involuntary Employment ideally, but Hungry Ghoul could come back too. And both of those work just fine with the artist. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I put myself in similar situation to you, Sierko. If I'm drafting seriously, I'm either looking at Perforating Artist or Healer's Hawk. Love your argument for the artist. Would be hard for me to not just take the Hawk at single color, 1 mana, solid. Like, I don't care what wheels type of scenario. Like, it's just, the card that is the easiest to slot in. So I would probably take Healer's Hawk. You also have the Beastkin Ranger and Librarian that can wheel quite easily, and white green is actually a decent deck. There you go. So I would take Healer's Hawk if I was in a competitive, a higher stakes environment. But if I just fired up a draft on Arena, I am slamming Herald of Eternal Dawn. Like I also have not had a chance to play with that card, and I want a Swiftfoot boots it up, and I would just want to do all this stupid, I want to draft Snakeskin Veil and just make my opponent's life just absolute hell with the Herald. I want it. I want to do it. So I would definitely just take that card because, Healer's Hawk is boring. Okay, let us continue. First, simple question, Sierko. What have you been playing? What's that?
Well, I did play some Once Upon a Galaxy recently. That's pretty fun.
That doesn't sound like the right type of answer to this question.
I'm just chilling for some party.
Yeah, and Louise.
No, I've been playing Foundations.
Okay.
Also Standard for some weird reason.
What the? Who are you?
I am playing the Otters deck.
I'm completely unaware of Standard metagame. I know what I can figure out what the Otters deck does. You better freshen up before Chicago. I'll do that when the new set comes out.
Otters is a combo deck from Jason Yee and CFT Sox that basically creates almost infinite mana with the green, what's this called? Enduring Vitality.
Oh, yeah.
And then it makes a bunch of otters and then plays a Song of Totentans to make rats, and it sort of makes it into infinite mana engine with Valley Flat color. It's so sweet.
But then you've also been playing Foundations?
And I also been playing Foundations.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, those are two opposite ends. So the reason I ask what you've been playing, normally I wouldn't have to, right? Normally I would just assume that you're playing whatever the current set is. And I would also assume you're playing limited Sierkovitz. But right now we are faced with a choice. There are two actual sets out. There's Pioneer Masters and there's Foundations. And I know my experience, I mentioned it before last week or the week before on the show, but I will reiterate it here, is when Pioneer Masters came out, I went over and I drafted it a lot. I probably drafted it 25 times, something like that, 20, 30, somewhere in that range, and found it lacking. It did not hold up for me. There was a whole lot of gates playing happening, which I do enjoy, but the deck didn't really click for me. I found I was playing against it a lot. And overall, the format to me felt very much like what it is, which is a reprint set with all the limitations that has from a design perspective. And so I was like, well, I'm not really enjoying this. This is kind of a flop for me. I guess I'll just fire up a Foundations draft, right? Because it's still there. And like, what else am I going to draft? I don't think the cube was up at the time. So I fired up a Foundations draft and I have not looked back, Sierkovitz. I have drafted it basically every day since. I really enjoy Foundations draft for some reason. It's weird when Pioneer Masters came out, I remember kind of thinking, okay, I'm probably done with Foundations. Like it's a simple set. I can go to this more complicated one that has, older cards, a lot more going on, that type of thing. That has not been the case at all. I went running back to Foundations and I have not drafted Pioneer Masters since. And so for me, this is very much a decision that is easy. I'm going to draft Foundations. And you said you've been doing it too. But that brought up a question. What have people been playing? So Sierkovitz, we looked that up.
Yeah. By the people, of course, we mean the people, aka 17 Lens users, the best people. Let's not be ashamed of using that kind of terminology.
Yeah, the best people,
because that's what I have data for. And it's been even. It's been very, very shockingly even. In the last week, they had 55,000, 54,000 games logged for either of the formats. So there's basically nothing in between them, which is great because it means that everyone can find their yum and their yuck. It's just that the yums and the yucks are 50-50 split.
I was surprised to see that. I honestly, I actually thought that more people would be playing Pioneer Masters. When we were looking it up, I was thinking, I think it's probably going to be a little more popular, but it looks like they're effectively equal.
Well, I mean, in the first 5 days of the format release, it was played twice as much. And, that's a big thing for a supplemental product because obviously more people play Standard, especially with the Standard-centric calendar this year. Then they play Pioneer, which there's nothing going on in Pioneer. So there is no reason for people to, pad their Pioneer collections right now.
And you're saying that in the first 5 days, they played twice as much Pioneer Masters as Foundations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like 80,000 to 40,000 games in the first 5 days of the format. I did that comparison.
How does that compare to is that normal?
So I think in general, it means that people drafted more in that period than they would have done in a normal year. I looked at the analogous time of 2023 when there was only LCI available. And LCI had like 45,000 games logged in at that time. Now, of course, it's hard to compare because we don't know how many 17 Lens users were there and there are now.
Right.
But it looks like there is like a good 2-3 times more people drafting than they did at the same time before Christmas period of 2024. Maybe there was a cube available at that time as well. I didn't double check that, but that could have been. But in terms of the normal set, numbers were comparable, and then there was the extra set that people enjoyed and do enjoy.
Okay.
To my bewilderment.
Yeah. So how do you feel about this? Like, this is, how many sets did we have come out this year? Like 6? Or sorry, not this year, last year, I should say now.
I did a thread about releasing my favorite trophy deck that I played with from each format. So I know exactly it was 6 sets.
It was 6?
I looked.
Okay.
Yes. Plus the Pioneer Masters is the sort of 7th.
How do you feel about that you're a content creator and a player, just like me. How does that hit you? I mean, that sounds like a lot to me.
I have my reservations about it. I like new cards. I like playing with new cards, but I also like arriving at a certain depth, both in terms of my content creation and in terms of my gameplay. And I feel that with the short 2-month kind of cycle, I sometimes don't arrive there. Like, I normally do my early data episode, then I go a bit more deeper into the draft patterns. Then I usually do some like super deep dive on something very set specific. And then I have one episode that I usually reserve for myself as my guilty pleasure when I try to answer like a long-standing heuristic and try to really do a deep dig in the data to try to figure it out. But with the current sets, I just like run out of time because at certain stage you need to start doing the previews and the draft skeletons before the set is released or whatever set review for in your case, and you want to have some kind of an episode that closes and sums up the format. And when you try to put all those things, usually this bigger depth content has to drop out because I do it for myself. I know that it has the least views that I do. It's the most valuable, I think, in terms of like how good quality data is. But the ones that get the most views is obviously the early data or the set review, because that's what people want to see, and there's a bigger audience for that because more people draft at the beginning of the format than at the end of the format. So that thing naturally gets trimmed. Like in your case, my visits got trimmed because of lack of time, and I know we talked about it. And then we were in the middle of arranging the date for Duskmorn when you realized, oh God, there is a set review that we have to do, and there's just no time for that. And then which was a shame because Duskmorn was a banger of a format, and I didn't get to talk about it.
Yeah, and we love to have you on to give your take on the format at a certain point, and then if they're just ramping up to new sets in the middle of it, it does feel. I mean, I don't know. At least as a player, to me, it feels like a bit of overload. I know that that's been a big feedback from the Magic community in general over the last several years, is that the amount of products that Wizards is putting out has gotten out of hand, or it feels overwhelming, or I can't keep up anymore. Because I think that there was a long period of time where there was a reasonable-ish expectation that if Magic was like your main hobby and the thing that you did the most, that you could actually buy the products as they came out. And that is definitely no longer the case unless you're wealthy, and even if you are, like, how are you going to devote enough time to actually playing all of these? And for people like Sierkovitz and I know Paul and Luis and stuff too, same thing. It's like, we like to go deep on these formats. Like, we like to really try some stuff out. We like to, I always have my eye on the kind of ambitious build arounds, or, the card that we open, the Herald or something, where I'm like, oh, I'm going to try to do something cool with that. But I save those, right? That's a month 2 thing, right? Because at the first part, I just want to win. I want to figure out what's good. I want to be able to convey that to the audience. But I look forward to that sort of second stage where you can go deeper into a format and try some stuff that maybe is a little bit on the fringes, or adapt to what's been going on in the format. And it does feel like if a new set's coming out, that makes it really difficult. Yeah,
it's even harder to build decks, require greater knowledge of the format. It's like not easy to build a 5-color soup control based on some obscure theme and a build around if you don't know exactly which cards will be the best fit. With 2 months of playing, you have a very good feeling of what that card might be. And I never have a problem that there is like too many secret layers released, because that's not the problem. That's not an issue.
I just don't buy them.
You don't need to buy all of them, or you don't need to buy any of them for that matter, because they're cosmetics, really.
Right.
But if we're going to too many main sets, that becomes a problem, especially for someone that is a content creator, because you sort of are obliged to cover them. And then you also don't have enough time to cover them properly, which means that you cover them not so well.
Right. You end up missing stuff. I don't like to
deliver lower quality content. It's just like I'm not, I clearly not doing it for the money, so I do it for the quality. And if I do it for quality, I'm not really pleased with myself if I only have to deliver those, early data episodes that I make are valuable to some extent because they give you the early overview of the format, but I know that they are based on imperfect information. I know that they are based on shallow understanding of the format. I know that they're based on honestly bad data, because it's data of people who don't know what they're doing, because it's 5 days of the format. Some people figured it out. Some people figured out one archetype and force it. And some people still have no idea what they're doing. And that's the data I'm basing on. And I know that this is not perfect. That's why I like my episodes that go week 3, when I have a better quality data and I can tell what in the first week was wrong. But I'm having less and less space to do that. And I don't know how to solve it. I mean, part of it could have been making the spoiler season shorter. Because honestly, spoiler season takes up a lot of, wind from content creation, because people are already focusing on 2 weeks. We're seeing 5 cards a day, and that's it. Making a 1 week spoiler season may be one of the possible solution. But of course, the easiest one is to space them nicely and give more time. I think Duskmorn was done dirty because that was very short.
And it was such a good set too. Yeah.
I had education duties and I couldn't physically play enough of it. And I love the format. I played as much as I could, but I could not play much. And that's I basically missed it because, you blink it, you lose it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting from content creator perspective too, on what you were saying, which is like, our approach on LR is always trying to reverse engineer what would be best for our audience, right? Like what serves our audience the best as far as, informationally. And, that's why we love to have you on the podcast, because, we feel that you offer a unique perspective that is actually translatable and helpful to the audience. It's fun to talk numbers. It's fun to talk theory, but we like to translate that into actionable things that our audience can do. And we feel that the way that you digest the data and then come to conclusions is exactly the way that, we would want to do that, which is why, you're a regular on the show every set at least. But when it comes to the type of things that we're seeing now, it really puts us in a pinch, right? Like right now we did a foundations crack a pack. We're going to be talking about our main topic, which we're going to get to in just a minute, is about broad strokes. It's not going to be about either of the sets, but that's kind of necessary right now, because if we go deep on Pioneer Masters, then everybody who's playing foundations is going, well, this just isn't for me. I'm not playing that set. And if we go deep on foundations, it's the same thing for the Pioneers Masters folks because we have this awkward situation where there's two sets running and they're running simultaneously and equally to each other. I would have expected that the community would have kind of decided one or the other, and we could feel good about saying, well, this is where people are playing. So like, even though I'm not a huge fan of Pioneer Masters, if the numbers were 80-20 in favor of that, we'd say, look, this is where our, 17 lands, there's a big correlation between 17 lands users and our audience. And we would feel pretty safe to say, let's talk about Pioneer Masters. That's where our audience is at. Instead, it's 50-50. I'm like, I don't know. Like I could talk about foundations all day. I know every single thing now. I've done a billion drafts of it. But if that's missing half of our audience, it makes it kind of weird. And, if we do a show where we split it, it's also, I have to say, it is difficult to keep up with them too. Like I did my Pioneers Masters drafts. I have a good understanding of the basics of the format, but then I stopped. Like I am not on draft 80. I am on foundations, but I'm not on Pioneer Masters. And it's really hard to get really good at two formats at the same time. Not to mention just the practical things like, if you've ever tried to track two formats at the same time, they blur together. And you'll be like, oh, well, why don't you just take the burst lightning? And you're like, because that's in foundations and not in this set. And you're like, oh, right. I hope I wheel this card. It's like, it's not in the set,
It doesn't help that both sets are filled with reprints.
Right. Totally. This might be the perfect storm, right, for how difficulty of tracking two sets simultaneously. Anyway, I wanted to bring that up just as a way to kind of, is this where we're going and what does it mean, as far as like for us content creators, but also for us players? I mean, there was kind of a mutual understanding, I think, that there would always be the thing to draft, like let's say on Arena, and then there was stuff off to the side. There would be a format from back in the day that they would bring back on. But everybody knew that wasn't the main focus of attention. That was like an alternate product for people that really enjoyed that set and wanted to go for it, but that the whole audience wasn't running over there. There would be Vintage Cube or a cube format that was specific to Arena. And that's fine. That would run and get good eyeballs, and it would be something to talk about. But it was kind of understood that the main format that was out was the place to go. And now that isn't the case anymore, and we've got to kind of navigate it as players and content creators. Okay.
Yeah, you gave me an appetite. When I really would want to have Vintage Cube on Arena. I think that would have been big. I know that it probably won't happen, but
it might.
I have a play group on paper. We played last week, and I trophied. I opened 3 Moxen. That was very easy.
Wow. What colors were you?
Both mono red, and I was splashing. I had some black, and I was splashing like Lingering Souls for free because I could.
Man, mono red,
sort of like
3
mono red Reanimator. I had like.
You're rude.
What's the Archon of Cruelty and some reanimate spells?
Are they still friends with you? 3 Moxen Reanimator, and you're not mono red if you're splashing for black and white, but
It was mainly red, but my reanimator enablers were like Fateless Looting and Inti, that kind of stuff.
Inti, man, that's nice. All right, let's get to our main topic here. So last week we answered the question from our Patreon supporter Michael, where he said, "Hi guys, I have a question on how to value pick 2 in a draft. Let's say I pick a B level white card for pack 1, pick 1. For pick 2, I see a C level white card and a C plus level black card. Should I pick the white card and try to solidify in white, or pick the slightly better black card and leave myself more options? Does the answer change if pack 1, pick 1 is an A level card?" So Paul and I went deep on this question, and it brought up broader topics as well with regards to do you just take the best card out of every pack until you kind of get a sense for what colors are open? Do you try to stick in one color while doing the same thing? Do you religiously try to stick into 1 or 2 colors? If you take a white card and then a black card, are you just white, black, and that's going to be it for the rest of the draft? Or do you stay open? And is it possible that by the end of the draft, maybe you're blue green because that was what was there and you ditched those cards? We went pretty deep on it. And Sierko, you said you were listening to that and jumping up and down because you had recently done some work on that exact topic.
Yeah, I mean, it was so funny. I was listening to the episode and the question appears and I'm like, damn it. Like 2 weeks ago, I did exactly that analysis. I literally exactly that analysis. What would happen if I picked the best card in my first pack. Then I have the second pick, and do I pick another best pick from that pack, or do I pick something weaker that is on color? Now, when I say exactly that analysis, I didn't look at the color because that would require like million hours extra of analysis. I looked basically at the rank of the card in the pack. So I took all the 17 lands draft data. I assigned the rank of a card for every card in the packs that we were drafting in each pack.
And this would be the games in hand win rate.
Okay, but based on games in hand win rate, but I didn't look at the games in hand win rate of them. I looked at, is it the best card in the pack? Is it the second best card in the pack? Is it the third best card in the pack? And so on and so forth.
So only relative to the other cards in the pack.
Exactly. And
Gotcha.
Of course, in the first, in pack, pick 1, you have 14 cards in the pack, and pick 2, you have 13 cards, and it goes down. Like at the end, you only have 1 card. You always pick the best card in the pack from the last pick.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean it's a good card. It's the best card in the pack.
Right.
And then my analysis was just trying to look at, okay, what happens? What is the relation between the average card rank that I pick in the first 2 picks, first 4 picks, first 6 picks, first 8 picks, and the win rate? Now, in the first pick, it's obvious that, it's easy to pick the best card only. But if you have 8 picks, it's really hard because you either pick multicolors draft, where you pick every card that is good but doesn't necessarily fit all the same colors.
I mean, you can have all 5 colors quite easily, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start picking weaker cards, does it impact the win rate? What is better, to draft only good cards or to draft cards that are weaker but in your color?
Mm-hmm.
And for the exact scenario that I'm sorry, I forgot the name.
That was Michael.
Michael did. I have this particular analysis, and it all depends a bit on whether you end up playing those cards or not.
Okay.
But if you picked the best card in pack 1 and the best card in pack 2, and you play both of them at the end in the draft, your expected win rate in that draft will be 56.4%.
Okay.
Now, if you pick the best card in pack 1 and the second best card in pack 2, that drops down, and you play both of them in the end. So hopefully you pick the second white card.
Mm-hmm.
You end up having a 55.7 win rate. So you drop by 0.7%. If you skip playing one of them, even though you skip playing one of them, so maybe you pick this white card and the black card, and you end up only playing the black card or only playing the white card. But you pick the best cards, you still get a 55.3. So slightly less than if you played both cards, if you picked the first and the second best card in the pack. And if you picked both cards, but you ended up not playing one of them, because maybe you picked 2 white cards, but one of them was not playable. It's a very unlikely scenario, but then you will have like 55. And this is not a problem. these are very close. So if you have to pick the second best card that is on color with you, you don't get a big punishment.
Right.
However, if you start going for like the fourth, fifth best card in the pack just to stick to your color, then you start seeing like a punishment. Like if your average card rank that you picked was fourth, you already only get 53% win rate. If it was sixth, you only get like 51% win rate.
Oh, wow.
So you have this big drop off, and this is like after 2 picks, you already see that kind of a big drop off, and it only gets more and more the more cards you have. And if you look at what happens after pick 8, now you will never have a situation that for the first 8, it very rarely happens that for the first 8 picks you pick the best card in the pack, because in the end you're going to be swayed by something being more on color, and you try to find your own identity and stuff. Mm-hmm. But if the average power level of the cards in your first 8 picks is between the best card and the second best card in the pack. So you pick either the best or the second best card in the pack based on the win rate. Your expected win rate is around 58%.
Wow.
And independently of how many of them do you play in the end.
Really?
It's more or less if you play all 8 of them, you have a 58% win rate. If you only play 4 of them, you also have a 58% win rate.
Wow.
And it doesn't really matter. But if you drop and your average card is between second or third best after those 8 picks, then you have like 56% win rate when you play all of them, but only around 55 when you play 4 of them.
Interesting.
And it sort of goes linearly. So you can quickly see that there is like a drop of 2 percentage points just by picking this card one less. And if you pick like bad cards, like 6th most powerful card in the pack, you end up with like 49% win rate. So there is a huge drop off on those. So it turns out that drafting the best cards available is something that is beneficial. And also, like after that, I tried to disentangle it. Like, is it because of the player skills? And it is. Like players who win more, they end up in those good drafting good cards decks more frequently. If you look at the players with like 60% win rate on Arena, they draft the decks that have that pick the between best and the second best card in their deck roughly 18% of the time.
18,
yeah. Mm-hmm. And like 33% of the time they are between the second and third best. So around half of their drafts end up in this range of I picked cards from 1, 2, 3 position in the pack. If you look at the players with like 40% of the win rate, so below average and definitely below average for 17 lands, they only pick 6% of the time they pick the best cards in the pack.
Wow.
And maybe 17% of the time they pick the second best. So it drops from 50% to not even 25%. And it's opposite, of course. They will often draft bad cards more frequently. So just knowing what is the best card in the pack, what has the highest win rate, can be like this easiest boost in your win rate. If you think that you're struggling with your drafting, I'm not normally the person that will recommend following the data blindly.
Right.
Because obviously at a certain level, subtlety has to be used in what you're drafting. But if you're a beginner, if you're struggling with crossing the 50% win rate on Arena, that's probably where I would start. I would just blindly draft for the first 8 cards, best or the second best card in the pack, while trying to maybe pick the second best one when I think that it might lead to an open lane. And then after the 8 picks, you can start actively thinking, what lane should I be picking? This is the moment when you get the signals. So you have a base of cards, and what signals are the strongest should dictate what you're drafting. And I'm pretty sure that for a lot of people that are like in this zone between 40 and 50% win rate, this is going to be like an instant way of boosting the win rate.
Definitely.
Would I recommend that strategy to you? And Lewis would probably make a joke here about you being at a 40% win rate, but I'm not. I wouldn't ever recommend it to you. No, I did not. I implied it, which is as well as doing it, but without specifically saying so.
Okay,
I know that making fun of Luis gives you followers. Making fun of you or Paul Cheon is probably cancelable offense, so I'm not going into that. I'm not going into that. I was glad that he's not there because I thought, oh God, I will make some joke and then I will just see like half of my followers leave me. I mean, I can't risk it.
You do not want to mess with the Chi entourage. I'll tell you that.
Oh, no. The Chi entourage, no. They will just go humph and half of your followers
You
gone.
will get humphed, yeah.
But I would never give that advice to you or someone who is even like at the 55% win rate on average, because I know that they wouldn't be at that level without good understanding of the format. I would still tell them to look at picking the best card in the pack more often, but they can use their context more sensibly. And I think that this is something that, is not often talked about in teaching how to play Magic, that every group of players will have certain different needs. It's like my daughter is learning to play piano and she started with the do, re, mi, fa, sol, and was playing that for hours and hours and hours. Like then she started simple melodies, learning how to read the notes. And then she's playing more complex things right now. But no one is expecting her to sit at the piano, plonk 5 notes, and then all of a sudden try to play Rachmaninoff's concerto.
Right.
While in Magic, it sort of is expected from people. Like you barely know how to put 2 pieces of cardboard together, and then you're sat at the draft pod with grinders on Arena who spent like the last 3 decades wasting time when playing drafts, and you're expecting to be competing on that kind of playing field, navigating a draft through people that are, either predatory forcing or durdling and completely obscuring any kind of signal, and you don't know what's going on because the person next to you has already 7 colors, despite only being 5 of them in Magic. And you're supposed to navigate it. It might be very confusing. And then you listen to podcasts, and then they tell you complex things that require theoretical knowledge and maybe some pre-existing knowledge even, and it's really hard to find your way. And I think that the easiest thing to start drafting at an acceptable level, look at the win rates, understand that what you're doing is sort of dumb in the long term, but it's going to push you quickly through those early stages of discovery. You will pick the good cards, and when your deck contains good cards, you will win more just automatically because the deck carries you. Because I assume that anyone who starts playing limited does know how Magic works because they played constructed in some way of format or commander, so they know how the interactions works. But limited has additional layers that need figuring out. Yeah. Best way of figuring it out is not to lose all your games early because you get detracted from playing it because losing is not fun.
Right, and people will stop. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you want to play and continue playing, look at those win rates, follow them blindly early until you get your footing. Once you get your footing and you think that, I got this past this stage that I actually know what I'm doing, then you can start improvising and ignoring that first advice. But this is the scaffolding that you're going to build your limited skills on. It's not useful for advanced players, but for the beginners, probably a game changer.
Yeah, this really brings up a couple of things in mind, which is one is that it does reinforce some of the things that we've talked about on the show for a long time about taking the best card. A lot of times people will make up excuses on why not to. There's a signal.
I'm the first one to do that. I'll just pick the builder's talent and hope for the best.
Right. And, and people they'll do that. They'll do that where they have like an idea for a deck. They'll also say things like, well, I don't want to send a bad signal, or I don't want to put my neighbor. Like we've always told people, like, don't worry about the person to your left. Like, yes, it is a factor in draft. It is not a 0, but it is so much better for you to just take the best card out of the pack. Like, we hear this all the time, right? Like, oh, there's 3 really good black cards. One of them's a bomb and then 2 like premium cards or whatever. So I'm going to take this mediocre white card. And that way I'm not, I'm playing nice with my neighbor to my left. And we're always just like, take the bomb. Like, just take it. They only influence one of your packs. You get to influence 2 of theirs. And your win percentage is just going to go down if you try to get cute and do stuff like that. And, that's why when we answered this question from Michael, the way I framed it was you can take a card of the same color if it's a tiebreaker. Like if all else being equal, right? It's just like these two cards, there's one, I have a good white card and there's a solid white card and a solid black card, and I just can't distinguish between them. Then go ahead and take the white card. Like that, you do get a little benefit of having, more of your cards in the same color, but not at the expense of power, not at the expense of just giving up raw card power. And that brings me to the other thing that I really like this, Sierko, because I remember, when we first started doing the podcast, and I was down at my local game store for the for F&M or for the weekly drafts that they had done. And after we started doing the show and it started getting more popular, I would have people often come up and say, "Hey, can you help me build my deck?" Right? And they would have already drafted it with no help, but they wanted me to help them figure out what to play. And I saw a pattern pretty quickly. And the pattern that we would recognize now is really simple. They were playing bad cards, right? They just would take low win rate cards. But at the time, it was more like they were taking cards that didn't do very much, right? That didn't attack, didn't block, didn't remove something from the other side. These would be like, it's an artifact and you can sacrifice a creature to get a benefit, right? And it's
the cards that offer dreams, but not necessarily, but you have to work for them rather
you
than
have
the
to
cards
work
that
for them, and
already
they work
did the work by being designed that they make automatically the work.
Right. Or, especially for like a new player, they may take a card that says like mill your opponent for this many cards, but they didn't have anything else. It was just a one-off in their deck and they're like mill you for 4 for blue.
I mean, I played against someone in the pre-release for Foundations, and they just played Sphinx's Tutelage against me.
Right, with no support.
And
right?
I played turn 3 Atali, and that was the difference between our decks.
Right. You can play Sphinx's Tutelage. It's not very good, but you can play it if you support it, right? If you build a deck around it and it becomes somewhat of a win condition for you, you might be able to make it work. That's an advanced play and not really advisable, right? Like, especially if you're trying to win. Right. But they're just going to run that out because it's a cool card with a cool border and it might be a rare. It's from a bonus sheet or whatever. And so what I would always see when people would hand me their deck to build is I would just start taking all that stuff out and replacing it with a combat trick or another mediocre creature. And they were like, but that card's cool. That card does something. And I'm like, it doesn't. Right. So what I would do, I would just say, do you want to totally cool if you want to build it that way, no problem, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to build it how I would build it. And you can choose, you can do whatever you want with it after that. You can leave it how I did. You can swap out some of the cards you wanted to play. You can go back to your build, but I'm going to show you, and I would lay it out too. I wouldn't just hand it to them shuffled. I would say, here's how I built it. And then I would say, and then, you can do whatever. And almost always they would say, oh, I'll play it like how you built it. Like that. I want to try it out or whatever, and then boom, they'd start winning more. Right. And it's like, because all they had to do was cast spells and all of a sudden things were dying and damage was happening and they were blocking. And it was like, oh, and it was like giving them Excalibur, right? Because they couldn't mess it up. They could obviously mess up gameplay all over the place. But if I handed them a deck like that and I said, approach each turn with the rough goal of using up all of your mana and go forth, young one, into the world, I bet you their win percentage went up 12% or something, right? It was this huge, for people like you and I, Sierko, it's like an unfathomable jump. It's an unattainable number. But just having that tool that is like an actual deck that functions, and also, by the way, no splashes, the best mana we could put together, maybe even cutting a 3-drop that's double colored that they didn't really support, right? I mean, they just go, wait a minute, that's in my colors. What are you doing? And it's like, trust me, this is what I'm going to do. Again, you can put it back if you want, but this is literally how it built this. And that ended up becoming, at least somewhat on the show. Again, I referenced it earlier about what we call CABS theory, right? Which is exactly what it fits exactly the description of what you just said, in that it's not really for advanced players. And it's a great way to get fundamentals understood. about how Magic works and what's good and what's not, and consistency of build and mana and curve and creatures, combat tricks removal versus fancy stuff, of just getting you that baseline. And I feel like what you're doing and what you're advocating for here is taking that and moving it up further stream, right? Because at the local game store, they already drafted the deck and they handed it to me. But if I could give them the tool of a heuristic that says, hey, take the best card for roughly the first 8 picks, and then at that point, try to get your feet under you on what 2 colors you might want to go into. That might be too much for a new player. It's a lot to track. It can get confusing. But let's say that they've drafted a bunch, but it's just not working for them. They can't win. They can't figure out what to do. This is the type of advice that you can grab onto and scoop up a bunch of win percentage points that helps get you understood on what you're supposed to be doing. And then, of course, one of the things that came up, Sierko, when you were talking is, okay, take air quotes, the best card. But you and I both know that depending on what color pair you're in, the best card changes, right? We talked a lot about involuntary employment today, right? Like if you're black-red, and it's, pick 6 and you're not going to wheel the thing, you need to take the involuntary employment because in your deck, it's a 59%, 58% win percentage card. On average, it's 55, right? But, that's nuance. That's for people to figure out down the line.
There's also the thing that this comes in. If I would be like looking at win rates on 17 lines while I was drafting, I would probably look at the generic game played win rate for the first 8 picks.
What does that mean?
And after that, so generic, which means not into specific color pair. The more I am finding the lane, the more I would switch to picking cards.
Understood.
You can filter by the color pair in the 17 lines, and then you switch to it. So, normally we use game in hand win rate. But early in the draft, I like to use games played win rate, which shows you the win rate of the card being in the deck at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I'm interested initially is getting a good deck. And this sort of accounts for the cards that will be in my deck, most likely, because it shows the data, not only of how the card performs, but also how the card performs in the context of the decks that it's in. Judging by the fact that 60% of the time I won't draw this card, I will draw other cards that accompany it, and they will have big impact on the games played win rate. That's why early in the draft I like to look at my game played win rate, later game in hand, and if I'm in the color pair, I also refine the win rate by the color pair, so I know exactly which cards are good in that particular color pair.
Totally.
Also, with Michael's thing, there is another layer of what you've been talking about, beginner players or people that are starting to draft, where I often see decks that have 8 bangers, but once you cross the banger zone, you see very mediocre cards. The 15th playable is something I would not consider putting in my deck, and 23rd playable is completely trash. And the strategy that Michael wanted to apply by picking a white card and then picking a slightly weaker white card to follow it up can lead to the third pick when you also pick the slightly weaker white card. And then you pick and it's like death by million cuts, by sticking to white, you end up with this deck that has maybe good top end. You have a couple of bombs even, because you first 3 picks, usually you are sort of uncontested and you will get some good stuff for your color. But because you don't draft the open color because you went so deep so early, you will end up with those substandard cards making the bulk of your deck. And if you draw your bombs, it's fine because bombs are good. But if in many games you will just draw the back end of your deck, and then you're struggling because those cards are not competitive in a Magic the Gathering game when someone has, a deck maybe without a single bomb, but they have 9 good uncommons because the color was open. And those 9 good uncommons will eat your deck built on 4 bombs and the rest of trash commons.
Really great point. I mean, to simplify it, it's opportunity cost, right? Like when you talk to people who are good at analyzing decisions in life, not just in draft, but in any scenario, if your friend comes up to you and says, hey, I have an opportunity to buy this house, should I do it? Right? The answer you want to hear from your friend is, what else could you do with the money? Right? Not, yes, that's a good deal, buy it. right? It's like, well, that might be a perfectly reasonable avenue to go down. If it's straight up a bad deal, well, okay, we can just dismiss it out of hand. But assuming you do a basic analysis and say, that's a fair price for that house and it meets your requirements, your lazy friend will go, yeah, sounds good. Thumbs up, right? It's the right price. Go for it, right? And that's fine. But like, if you want to go a little deeper in life, you would say, well, what else could you do with the money, right? Could you buy a smaller house and invest the rest? Could you try to get into a bigger house and have a payment? Is that something you're interested in because maybe you're going to have a big family soon or something, or maybe you have a parent that's going to come live with you and you want to get ahead of that or whatever, right? It's expanding out those horizons to say, well, what else could I be doing? And if you do that plan that you just mentioned, where you're like, well, I'm just going to stick to white, I'm going to keep taking these lesser cards. If you look back at the draft, what did you give up? What did you gain by doing that? Well, you gained consistency of color, which you valued very highly. What did you give up? You gave up all the opportunities to find the other color or another colors, even if you bail on white, and go down that road that had so much more fruit available to you because, each of these picks that you kept on taking white, you were giving up an opportunity every time to find a better lane, to take better cards, and to ultimately find yourself in a better position in the draft where by the time you're halfway done with pack 3, you're sitting pretty. You're going, I found the lane. I know where I needed to be. I had to sacrifice a little bit at the beginning of the draft because it turns out that white wasn't that open and these, it was black red that was the route I needed to go down. But since I stayed open, I was able to do that. If you stubbornly stick in a color thinking that you're going to get paid off for it by having a more consistent deck or whatever, that's not going to work. There are, of course, upsides to being in one color. Particularly, I mentioned it when we talked about this. It has to happen organically. That's kind of the asterisk on this, is that you can't force this scenario. But when one color is very open and you can have 8, 9, or 10 decent to very good cards in that color with a couple of feelers out in a second color going into pack 2, it's a very powerful position to be in. The problem is you can't manufacture that. You can't just take all the white cards that you see and go, see guys, I can do any other color going into pack 2, because what you've done is you've sacrificed the power of all of pack 1 to get that, and that's not worth it.
That's true. And like what you described, your best decks in a format are always going to be from the drafts where you just by luck stumbled upon an open lane for pick 1. And it's natural. The problem is that out of each 8 drafts, that will happen in one of them, and in 7 ones, those lanes are not going to be wide open.
Totally.
Or numbers can vary here and there. The problem is that if you pick the first few picks and you try to replicate it for the situation when the lane is not open and you're not open to be flexible, you're going to end up with those weak decks. And in my opinion, an advanced player or intermediate player even will realize that the color is not open and will weave out of this and look for an open lane later. And they are capable of doing that. But when you're a beginner, you very often dig yourself deeper in that hole when you try to force, and you don't know when to abandon. So it's a better strategy for you to pick this best card from each pack, and that way you will eventually stumble on the open lane because you have multiple of them available, because you were not stuck in your head to pick this one thing.
I often have to, remind myself of that. I'll take like a good white card, another good white card. Ooh, that's a pretty good green card. I am not white green. I am not white green. I am not white. Next pack comes up. There's a decent green card and there's a really good black card. Like, I will just take the black card. I have not decided yet what I am, even though it feels easy to just stick on the path that I'm on. It's like, there's a really good black card. Let's say I've got 2 good white cards, a good rare, a good uncommon, and then I pick up a Llanowar Elves or something like that, like a solid green card. And then the next pack has Bacon to a Pie or some, very good black removal spell, and it has Beastkin Ranger. The default is just to take the Beastkin Ranger. You got 2 green cards, 2 white cards, a Beastkin Ranger plus Llanowar Elves is a nice combo. Like, I'm off to the races. That is not a disastrous pick. But
Late bake is a good signal.
But I will often force myself to say, no, you don't know that you're this. Like, I'm very willing to give up a Llanowar Elves, right? Like, I am not stuck in a color pair because I have one decent green card, right? I will just take the bacon to the pie. And a lot of the time, by the time I get to pack 3, black was wide open and I'm black-white with a really good deck. And I'm like, why was I trying to hang on to green? Why would I do that? That early in the draft. There's one thing that's very simple, which is like, they say, don't get married to your first pick, right? So, you take a really good black card and you're just like, I'm playing this and that's it. Well, maybe you are. You probably are. In fact, Sierkovitz, you actually looked up some of this stuff and you're very likely to play that card. But it's not 100%.
First pick, again, I mean, I looked at it based on the rank of the card that you picked. And it's funny because, people, when they pick a card, they should be convinced that they will play it. Mm-hmm. But if you pick the card from like the top 5 cards in the pack, you play them roughly 85% of the time.
85?
85% of the time, they end up in the deck. When you pick the cards from the bottom 5 power level cards in the pack, the average drops to like 78.
That's still huge.
It's still a lot. And, it comes with certain things in the data. I'd like to strongly stress. If you pick the 14th best card in the pack, there are a couple of those big trap cards that particularly tempt certain type of player. The Clickant Sky Mage or whatever it's called, the 4 that the 1/1 that grows for every card you draw. That is one of the lowest win rate cards in the set. And people were picking it up, especially early in the format, because it was appealing at some levels.
It looks good, yeah.
And then it appealed to them. They picked it first because they thought it was a strong card. It was not that they picked a bad card knowing it's a bad card. They picked a bad card, getting bamboozled, basically, that this actually worth something. Mm-hmm. But still, they did play it less frequently than they would picking a good card. So somewhere at the deep subconscious level, they knew that this card is not as great.
Right.
So there might be something there.
Yeah.
And it's, like first pick already. If you pick the best card in the pack, 52% predicted win rate for the whole draft, just after the first pick. You pick the second best card, 54.6. Third best card, 53.8. Fourth best card, 53.2. And it sort of trickles down until, they pick 10th best card, it's already down to 51%. Mm-hmm. You pick the, weakest card in the pack, which happened more frequently than I thought. You drop down to 49. And
wait, you're saying that there's people that picked literally the weakest card in the entire pack?
In terms of the win rate, yes. And that was mainly those Clickant Mages. There were a couple of other trap cards.
Or like the 6-mana build-arounds.
Exactly.
Okay. That's me. That was me, by the way.
That was in your Storm. Anyone?
Yeah.
Worst win rate card of 2004. Thank you very much.
Oh, bad.
I just giving you the numbers, and these numbers were very, very peculiar to me. So when you look at the frequency, how often people pick the best card in the pack at pick 1, pack 1, I looked at 65,000 drafts. That's a lot of drafts to analyze the pick 1, pick 1. Yeah, I literally had to code to do that. I couldn't do it in Excel because the files were too big. I had to do it via Python.
You Pythoned it? Oh man.
Python route. Yeah, that's how seriously I approached that analysis.
I like this.
30% of the time, people pick the best card in the pack on their pack 1, pick 1. 17%
that
of the time,
is way lower than I would think.
17% the second best. So you got roughly 50%
about half
of the time they pick the first or the second, the best or the second best.
That's still lower.
Then third one is like 11. Fourth one is 6.7. And then between 5 and 10, it's around 4%. And it doesn't change at all. And then there's like a small drop of like 3.5 for the 10th, 3 for 12, 2 for the 14th. But it's still, people pick those cards quite
that's a lot. Half the time, now, just under half the time they take the first or second.
Some of the caveats. This data set contained the early data from just when the format was released, which means that people didn't know maybe yet that the card is bad, and it happened. maybe if I refined it for only like the week 4 of the format, you would see much more sharp when people know what is best. And maybe I will repeat that analysis, deleting the first 2 weeks and see how it changes. It would be interesting from psychological point of view anyway to see how knowledge of the format changes the first pick strategies. But it happened nonetheless that, a good 30% of the time people pick 5th to 14th best card in the pack.
That is, if you were to ask me to estimate that, I would have assumed that if we grouped the first and second best cards, right? Because there's arguments and,
Yeah, you could get probably like 70, 80%.
I would have guessed 70.
That was my guess.
I would have guessed 70. Yeah, high 60s, low 70s. I would have been like, that's like a little below 50. Man, we got a lot of work to do still, Sierko. Like people are goofing off on that.
And these are 17, by the way, these are 17 lands users.
Totally.
These are people with 55% win rate.
Okay, well, now I know why the set reviews do so well.
I do offer coaching, yeah? Just saying.
Yeah, serious. Do you really, though?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about it? I'm curious.
Well, you meet with me for an hour, and then it ends up being 1 hour and a half because I cannot stick to time. And we talk about your drafts, and I tell you what I think could be improved. And
but how do they, like you say, you talk to your students about their drafts? How do they show you their drafts?
17 lands, obviously. You have everything in 17 lands. So
you just
they
do
have
replays?
The draft portion. We look at the game replays. And, it will depend. Like, I have students who have, like, 45% win rate. I approach them differently because they need different things. I have students who are at my win rate at 60%. And then instead of, like, me being a teacher, I'm becoming more like a partner when we just bounce ideas off each other.
Ideas.
It will very much be dependent on the person, really, because I do believe that education has to be different at different levels. And, it's the same as you do in your education. Like elementary school, you do the basic. Middle school, you start becoming your own person. And then the teacher is sort of providing those stabilizing wheels for you to do it. When you go to the university, you have to show initiative yourself.
Right.
I know from experience that the academic lecturer will not care about you that much because they don't have time to do so because they have 70 other things to do in their life. Right. You have to show initiative and show independence. If you don't, then what are you doing at the university, honestly? It's the same with the magic levels. I mean, if you're the beginner, you need all the attention you can get because you still need everything to learn. You're an open book that needs to be filled with some kind of useful information. When you have 60% win rate, you clearly know what you're doing. You need some ability to maybe verbalize your own thoughts because you're going to teach yourself better than me. But sometimes it's good to have someone to bounce those ideas about and maybe someone with a different point of view, with a different approach.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a big part of your role here on LR, right? A lot of times, the normal time when we have you come on to talk on the show, it is after the dust is settled. And part of that is to allow some data to accumulate so that you have something that you can look at. But it's also like, that's usually the point at which Luis and I have kind of, settled our opinions about kind of where each of us stand on a format. And that's when we like to have you come in and say, here's where I'm at. Or, that's why when we do the Crack-A-Pack, when Sierkovitz comes on, I always kind of let him be the one to, I'll ask Luis and I for our quick opinions, but I want to know what you think, right? Because, you have a unique approach to a format and I want to know, where your brain's at. And so that's something that you could provide to your more advanced students.
Also, only your toughest audience survives till the end of the format. The rest are just getting ready for the review.
No, yeah, totally. It's the grizzled veterans that, they get to this point. Well, that's great stuff, Sierko. Thanks for taking us down that deep dive on what started off as a Patreon question of the week, ended up becoming a full-fledged topic here on the show. That's really good stuff. It was
a great question. I mean, it's one of the questions. Like, that's why I sat down and did this analysis, because I was actually curious myself. I was not sure if the answer is going to be as straightforward as it eventually was, but
it's shocking. I mean, seriously, like the number 65,000 is so crazy. And some of those conclusions or some of the things that you pulled out of that, I'm still like, wow, people are really messing around. I mean, that huge chunk of 4 percenters that you described. I mean, that's a big, that was what, 8
There's one
cards
thing that worries
worth?
that there might be a small signal of the rare drafting in there, but
yeah, well, rare drafting in most
It will.
scenarios is part of limited.
It shouldn't
I suppose,
change it that
but
much, though.
No, it shouldn't. Especially, yeah, that's wild. Okay, let's call it a show there. Sierko, thanks so much for coming on. And we're planning on having Sierkovitz on his normal slot as long as we can not get overwhelmed with sets every single time. But yeah, certainly
leave some space for TBS, for God's sake.
Yes,
I
and
missed that
TBS
episode.
too. Oh God, yeah. That's the thing, is like we love having our LR inner circle come on, and these things just. I mean, we still want to do our our reset reviews with TBS and hear his thoughts on the latest formats, and like that's gotten squeezed. And again, it's no reflection on him. It's just like, man. And then of course, the end of the year was a little bit hectic for us too, just because, Luis had the twins and, so we've been,
Still disappointed that he didn't get the best 2-for-1 of the year award at Limmy's.
Maybe we should.
Gabby should get that one.
Actually, Gabby wins that. Yeah, for sure. How about we retroactively give her the Limmy for best 2-for-1 of the year for sure? Yeah, Luis is. I talk to him all the time, and his sleep schedule is very gradually working its way back to not waking up 3 times a night. So he's getting there. But
how many meals does he have a day with the irregular sleep schedule, waking up at night 3 times?
I think
he is the most hungry host.
He did win hungriest co-host, but I think for him it's just like he grabs whatever he can whenever he can. Because I mean, his sleep schedule is wild. I mean, he's up 3 times a night, and then he takes a nap kind of in the middle of the day to try to recoup some of the sleep. But I mean, that's not. You don't feel fresh as a daisy at any point with that type of schedule. And I think at this point, he just grabs whatever he can, whenever he can, to eat, just to try to get through the day. But he said it is gradually getting a little bit like maybe he went from waking up 3 times a night to 2 or something like that, where they're slowly starting to get onto a little bit more of a regular schedule. And once he's done that, he'll come back and we'll still have you on, and Paul and everybody, of course. Sierko, where can people find you? You mentioned you do the coaching, you got your magic numbers. Like, where can people find your stuff? I'm
on Twitter and on Blue Sky. All of those things, I'm always as Sierkovitz. I didn't discuss it with you before the show, but there's one other plug that I wanted to make because I'm thinking about changing a career. So if there are any LR listeners that are looking for someone who is willing to dig deep into their data and come up with actionable advice, well, my work from here. You know that I can come up with actionable advice from a child's game, which means that probably I can come up with actionable advice from other things. So do contact me if you think that I will be a match for your organization.
Would there be are we talking like a business application for this?
Yep. I'm looking for actual job on the job market because I'm tired of academia's idiosyncrasies.
Oh man, next time we have Sierkovitz on, he's going to be reporting from his castle. If we unleash you on the open market, this is going to get crazy, Sierko. You're going to get a lot of work.
I just don't want to be doing it from under the bridge. That's also another option.
That's great. Okay.
Castle, yes, fine in the future. Not under the bridge, another situation. Hopefully from Cornwall. I do prefer remote. So yeah, that was my plug. But you can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Blue Sky, Twitch, all under Sierkovitz. It's hard to spell, but at least consistently it is the same nickname. So there you go. And
it will be in the show notes as well. And yeah, wow, that's exciting news, Sierki. I think you're going to do really, really well. I mean, I don't know. I think people that listen to the show have a good sense of how you work, how thorough you are, how intelligent you are, what a good communicator you are. And I'm complimenting you. You cannot interrupt me while I'm complimenting you. How intelligent you are, what a good communicator you are, and you're just a really fun person to be around. That goes a long way, for work environment stuff. You have a really good demeanor that doesn't, I mean, okay, look, I've never hired anybody to do the type of work that you do, but my assumption would be that it would be a little drier than the personality that you bring to the table. So yeah, I think you're going to crush it.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad now that Luis is not here, because he for sure would have some additional comments.
Oh, he definitely would.
Although he did endorse me when I wrote it on Twitter. So
he really likes you.
Counts for something.
If he makes fun of you, that means he likes you. Yeah.
I know. Why do you think I make fun of him? Not because I never make fun of people. I always had like a colleague at work that I didn't like, and that's the one person I never made jokes in the office, because I just thought that can go real.
Yeah.
To a friend, I can make fun because I know that I'm keeping it.
Well, so that
wraps.
explains why you said all those horrible things about Paul before we recorded the show today, right? All those.
I thought that it was in private.
Demeaning, horrible things that you said about Paul Chion and about his YouTube channel.
Oh, it's an awful YouTube channel, yeah.
Oh man, Sierko's leading into it. We have a rivalry now. This is great. No,
I don't have the rivalry with TBS anymore, because I was so starved of his content at LR that I actually invited him to do a lecture at the course that I'm giving at the university.
Oh, that's awesome.
He was kind enough to accept it, and he's just a most adorable, huggable person ever.
Oh,
and,
he's awesome.
I never want to make fun of him again. That's why I will run campaigns to reinstate the episode with TBS as quickly as possible.
You know what we need to do? I got an idea. If the day ever comes that both Luis and I can't do the show, we're going to hand it over to you and TBS for an episode and just let you guys go crazy. You can have special guest Paul Chion. It'll just be Nonsense City.
That's risky. We might get a special guest and Jeff, the producer, the most important part of the
Jeff
cast.
will be there for sure. He's there every show. All right, let's call it a show there. So you can find Sierkovitz and all the places at Sierkovitz. And again, I'll put that in the show notes. And then I assume people can get a hold of you through either of those social medias if they're interested in hiring you for
definitely.
Data.
Probably easier on Blue Sky, because I think Blue Sky is more friendly with messaging systems.
Okay, so there you go. We want to thank all of our patrons as well as Ultimate Guard for supporting the show. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. You can find me, Marshall_LR, pretty much everywhere. And as we mentioned, Sierkovitz, his handles down in the show notes below. That is going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week. Sierki, what did you celebrate Christmas over the holiday time?
I mean, if you mean sitting in the kitchen for 3 days straight, this celebration, then
that's where I'm going with it. I'm curious what, especially in your house, what did you make for Christmas dinner? Like, I don't know what tradition is, but like you have like multiple countries represented in your home.
Yes, that's definitely problematic to some extent.
So what happens?
All right. So Christmas Eve is usually the important one for Polish people.
Okay.
And because it's Christmas Eve, traditionally it's pescatarian, so no meat.
Oh, okay.
I normally do pierogi, which are Americans actually know what pierogi are, which is great. I mean, immigration helps. These are stuffed with porcini and cabbage for the Christmas variety.
That sounds lovely.
I made barszcz, which normally has a smaller version of pierogi that are sort of like wrapped around. But I couldn't be asked to do them because they are a pain, because you have to make, like, instead of making 50 pierogi, which is already a challenge, you need to make like 150 of those because they're smaller. I bought tortellini instead.
Oh, you cheated. but wait a minute, doesn't this kind of...
Time, I covered my wife's culture.
You covered the wife. So that's
there
amazing.
You go. So that was a bit of a cheat, but it's a good cheat, and tortellini are always great. And tortellini al brodo is a dish. It's more for San Stefano, so for the Boxing Day.
Okay.
Than for Christmas Eve. But hey, we can flex these traditions because of the different countries. For Christmas, I made a goose, which is a superior bird, I think.
Wow.
It's like a good mixture between... It's not as gamey as the duck, but it's not as bland as a chicken. And it's definitely better than the turkey while keeping the size that is Right.
A little more reasonable. Turkeys are huge.
I do like my goose, and obviously you then render tons of fat out of it when you cook it, so you have good potatoes with it. I made one of my favorite things ever, and I only like it, and I ate like a whole bowl of it over Christmas, and that is it's a layered salad where the base is salted herring fillets.
No.
Yeah.
What's on top of this?
So it's like you lay out the herring, then you lay like
Fish
raw
salad?
onion, you put mayonnaise, then you put cooked carrots, then mayonnaise, then potato mash, then mayonnaise, then beetroot, cooked beetroot, obviously, boiled beetroot.
What is this?
More mayonnaise, then grated eggs, and then cheese on top, like grated cheese on top.
Is this like the trifle from Friends?
It is the trifle. But it is actually very good if you like herring, which I religiously do because it's a great fish.
Oh man. Okay. Then the only other question is, what was for dessert?
For dessert, we had pandoro and panettone.
Oh, okay.
Which are both traditional Italian Christmas cakes.
Yeah.
I'm Team Pandoro, which is the taller one with more fluffy kind of cake and less raisins inside.
And the panettone, that's the one with the colors?
Panettone is the raisins, slightly shorter, more stodgy, I would say.
Okay.
We got it as a gift, so we had it, so we ate it.
Yeah.
And it was actually quite good because someone really spent a solid amount of money, so they got the good stuff.
Good one. Yeah, for mine, the traditional Christmas or Christmas Eve dinner would be turkey or maybe a ham or a ham, but I had crab. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so jealous because Cornwall has amazing crab, and it's probably I would have to concede the North Pacific crab will be something amazing because you have perfect conditions for seafood.
Yeah.
But Cornish crabs are amazing and they're freshly landed, so you can get them easy. My problem is that my daughter will not even think about touching it, and my wife has phobia of crabs, and I can't cook them. I love them. I absolutely love crabs.
So it's you and the
lobsters. Dog. Yeah. I can make mussels. That's as much as I can do, but...
Okay. Well, if you ever come visit me here, we'll go get Dungeness crabs together.
Crab extravaganza. In States, I do like the soft shell crabs. You don't get
those
them
are East Coast. Yeah, we don't have those.
I've only been to the East Coast. I've only been to Chesapeake Bay, and then I had soft shell crabs. They're amazing. So much less work. These
ones are the ones we eat are definitely work, but they're worth it. And you will have them.
What do you have? The Spideys or brown crab?
They're called Dungeness crab.
Dungeness crab. I have to Google that. But are they more like chunky or more like skinny legs?
They're more chunky.
Okay. Yeah. Because I know that in the North Pacific they also have this proper spider crabs, like with this kind of long legs that you need to basically suck like through a straw or something.
Yeah. The ones we get are the little fat ones. And
okay, cool.
All right, so we've got a date when you come to visit. Dungeness crabs on the menu.
Yeah.